representatives in the neighborhood, you can send them to the website and everyone can review it themselves. So again, the role of the Design Advisory Committee, and we do have two committees themselves, which is the Chinese and then the Hmong Advisory Committee. But really, your advisory role is to Parks and Recreation. So as the landowners or managers, I should say that we are facilitating the process, but it's really the community and the design advisory that's helping us to make some of these decisions. And so we're looking at you as members of the larger community, and you can take this information and send it back out to your networks for feedback. And so decisions are by consensus. We're not specifically voting, raising hands on some of the items, the design, the layout. And we're on the 4th Design Advisory Committee meeting, and we said there would at least be 6. So we're a little over halfway there. There may be some other opportunities to engage, such as the public meetings, but we'll get to those in the future. So your role is to help guide the design, whether it's specific details or layout itself. So those could be patterns, colors, forms, materials, cultural stories. And then we'll provide a lot of this to the review for the public meeting, or maybe a public presentation that we can post online. I did mention that there are other factors that as Parks and Recreation we are trying to take into consideration. And so that's our system, looking at some of the needs system-wide, whether it's parking lots, assessing the needs of our entire system. We're looking at the context, geographically, historic context of Phalen Park. We've got budget and funding, I wouldn't say constraints, but we have opportunities to spend the funding that we have allocated from legacy and state bonding. And then we have to take into consideration regulatory, such as the DNR, watershed, and our own operations and maintenance. And then the community and your input is one of the factors. So here's the garden location quickly. This key map here is showing Lake Phalen with Phalen Regional Park. The site is on the northwest side in between Round Lake and then Lake Phalen itself. And there is a channel which is south of the China Garden. So here's the China Garden, and this is the blow up of phases. And so during phase 1, if you remember, we installed the Western Archway, and we installed the Pavilion with some of the front plantings itself. And so now we're moving on to phase 2, which is highlighted in red, which is the Hmong Plaza. The Moon Bridge, we've got the donor wall area and Moon Gate. And then up on top here, which is part of phase 2, is the access. It's a user-created trail, which has been formed on the backside of the pavilion. So once again, this is arts and cultural heritage funding from legacy funding, and then also state bonding. And so we're through the community engagement phase. We'll go into design development and go into construction documents later this spring, with construction and fabrication hopefully this summer and fall. And so the purpose of the meeting today, I was talking about a lot of the specific details that you will help to determine, but today we really want to focus on the Hmong Plaza again, after the redesign by the Chinese designers. And we want to understand the feasibility of this design, looking at it in terms of space and function. We will show some more specific ideas in terms of patterns and colors, but I think we're really trying to figure out that dynamic of the amount of people we want on the plaza, and if it can be flexible enough. So here's a bird's eye view of the 2017 master plan. Here's the Hmong Plaza. Everything is sitting north of the channel, the donor wall area, and the Moon Bridge. So we'll specifically talk about the Hmong Plaza. If we have time, we can go to the donor wall and Moon Bridge. So this is what we heard from our previous discussions from our meetings 1 through 3. The purpose of the Hmong Plaza was, one, to celebrate, educate, for meditation and recreation purposes. It is a cultural bridge to strengthen friendships. It is a spot where we can display Hmong art and heritage, show the Hmong contribution to St. Paul, and peace and tranquility. So during one of the first presentations we had for the plaza, showing the layout, there was discussion that the 50-person plaza was not large enough. There was a need for 200 people. So that was one side of it. We also heard that a 200-person plaza would not be in harmony and fit within this type of space. And so we were considering, well, maybe there's an alternate location. After presenting alternate locations, we also heard that because of the blessing ceremony, the site dedication that happened in September, that it's too late to move the site. Also, the alternate location would be outside of the garden and would not promote friendship. So one thing that we did hear is, well, maybe we can consider an option that combines both of those, where there's a flexible open space to accommodate people, 200 people, while still having a plaza that can hold 50, that is designed for 50. So at this point, no decision has been made. Parks and Recreation, we went back to the Chinese designers, and we provided a lot of this information to get a redesign based upon Chinese principles of design, and then based upon what we've heard about the 200-person plaza and the need to have this space within the garden itself. And so we presented previously the existing site, and so if we look at this key map, we're on the north side of the channel again. We highlighted where the Hmong Plaza was located in 2017. So here's the footprint of the Hmong Plaza in 2017. This is the 50-person plaza. It is bounded by the channel, like I was saying, and on either side there is the pavilion that was constructed, and then the existing western archway. It is also bounded by trees on the north side and by a hill that raises up. You can see some of the dashed lines. These are the topographic lines, so you can see it rises up towards the back, so it's not necessarily flat. And then on the south side, it is bounded by the channel, and then topography that slopes down to the channel itself. And then there's also native vegetation that buffers that. And what I also want to show is I've got some red lines. The trees are highlighted in green. There is an open space where there are no trees. It begins to flatten out somewhat just because of the existing pathway. But there is an opportunity to create more of that flexible open space that we began to talk about in previous meetings. And so I just want to say one other thing, that the original plaza space that was designed in 2017 with the 50 people is 2,600 square feet. The proposed space that you will be seeing today is very similar at 2,800 square feet. So it's very comparable in size, and it is not an expansive space that we were looking at before. So moving forward, I just want to show a little bit of what we presented in 2017. So this is the original Hmong Plaza. You can see some of the artwork that you will see again in the next design. But it does have this intimate space. It's designed for 50 people. I would say that the intent of this design was that it's in harmony with other garden features, with general Chinese principles. And the purpose of the space would be to display Hmong arts and heritage, and it would serve as that cultural bridge and strengthen in friendships. Quickly, it's showing women's headgear. It's showing the reed pipe instrument. It's got the ox horn elements with this crossbeam, and it has a woman dancing and a man using the instrument. So there's a lot of the cultural elements that we discussed in the master plan that are carrying through. And so now this is the redesign that was submitted just at the end of this year. And this is looking at a similar capacity of 50 people. It still has that intimate quality. We're looking for harmony of the entire space. So all of these qualities are still intact. What has changed is it has more of an open plaza layout. So this is a view of the open plaza. This is the existing pathway. It could be realigned a little bit, but what you can see here in red is more of this multi-use space for events, where it has a multiple axis where you can use the space north and south, or you can use the space east and west. So you can see this is the arrows here for 50 people on the plaza. Maybe it's used for recreation, but then it can also be flipped on its axis and used east and west with the flexible open space. So one thing you'll notice in the back is this scenario does relocate the Hmong stones in this plaza space to allow for flexibility for a wider grass space. It removes one of the walkways currently that the stones are built around. It still includes all the Hmong cultural elements that we'll get into, but you can see this top view is standing at the Western Arch, and it's looking towards the Hmong Plaza. So this top view is standing off to the left here. What you can see is the open space. Now it does look like it has a slope to it, but I think during the design process this can be flattened out, and really these are just conceptual drawings, conceptual ideas, but it is separated by seating area, or it is separated by plantings. So you do have this area that would be separated from users on the trail compared to users at the event.
Brett, it looks like Linda has a question.
Yes, Linda, thank you.
A clarification question. It looks like the backside of the pavilion, or backside of the plaza, has lots of green space. It's not right up against the trees. So I'm wondering, did they pull the plaza forward, or is it just not an accurate rendering of how it would be situated with regard to the trees?
Yes, thanks, Linda. You're a little quiet, so if you could turn your volume up. But what I believe Linda's asking is the green space behind the pavilion. It looks like or the plaza looks like there's a lot more green space than there really is on site. I think that is just the conceptual nature of the drawings, and there would most likely not be that amount of green space. I think where the plaza is designed currently, it is bounded by the slope itself and then trees. And so when you're looking at this view, there's not as much green space in the background. That's why the axis is flipped. So the overflow could be utilized on the west side, or this grassy open space. Thanks, Linda. And so we're talking about other features,
We have
other
one more
cultural
question.
features.
Sorry, Brett.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
Chua? I could be saying your name wrong. Is there another question? Oh, you're muted. Okay, you're muted right now. I don't know if you're trying to speak, but maybe Brett.
Yeah, I'll keep going. Chua,
Can you hear
I'm
me?
sorry, I can't.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, I had to do like *6 because I called in.
Oh, okay. So you're on here twice. Got it.
My question is it too late to change the design, or is it set in stone kind of?
No, I don't think it's too late to change the design. I think our last discussion focused on the 50 person. I think in terms of the space, we are constrained by the size, and so we've discussed that
Oh, I'm talking
previously.
about structure that you're going, like whenever you have people going there to observe and think about, oh, this is the Hmong Plaza, what does this represent? Like whenever I first look at it, to me, I don't like, it doesn't strike me as this would represent like the Hmongs. And so that's why I was like, well, is this structure kind of like the design is what it is, or is there other considerations that you would consider?
Yes, I think there are other considerations that we can review. I think we'll get into that. And I'm open to suggestions. There is there's a maintenance aspect to that, and so we've hired an artist. That's Kao Lee. I believe Kao Lee Tao is on the call, and so I think we're going to get into a lot of those specific details. And so I think we're looking at a variety of things, whether it's going to be culturally relevant or is it feasible to actually construct. And so I'll welcome any suggestions. And I think we could talk about that after. I don't want to cut you off or diminish those specific aspects. I think what I'm more interested in, at least up front at the beginning of our meeting, is how does this space function in terms of how people see this being used? So
Yeah, that's thoughts too. It's like the purpose, right? Why would people want 200 if people, because whenever Hmong people gather, they do gather in big groups, which is in my mind why 200. But if it's just for everyday visiting 50, I don't know if you got more feedback around why the 200.
So Brett, I want to make sure that we're working through this. I don't know if you have more that you want to just kind of introduce as a description of this design before we kind of go into, because we're getting a lineup of questions. So up to you, but I just wanted to, I don't want to keep telling you we've got another question if you want to keep moving forward first. I don't know what's most helpful for you.
Yes, thank you, Ellen. I think if we're starting to line up questions, I'll please go through this. It'll be quick. We'll get through the layout, and I do want to hear about specific questions. But I also want to talk about function and how this space is going to be used. And so I guess the point of this slide here is showing that the design of the design features of some of these elements, and I think these can be discussed on what is culturally relevant. This is from the design of the Chinese artist, and I think this is open to interpretation, but it does have a lot of the elements that we've discussed in the past, which is the drum, the instrument, the women's headgear, necklace, ox horn, other spiritual features, and then embroidered patterns. And so I do have this note at the bottom, like I do think that this stuff is going to be reworked, and we're going to figure out based upon materials, operations, and maintenance, and culturally what is significant. So this is the back wall. I just want to point out this feature. It's showing that it's 15 feet high. Here's the back wall. This feature right here is shown at the bottom, which is another wall that has information, culturally significant information for the Hmong. And it also, this top area shows information on the Hmong migration story. This is a close-up picture of the surfacing. It is showing a circle, which is commonly used pattern symbolizing reunion and happiness. This is showing another image of a plaza, which is pulling the inspiration from. And then it also shows this, the plan view here shows a very linear type plaza, but it is open on both sides, and is showing the circular pattern. Along the edges, it has pavers, but it's utilizing a variety of Hmong embroidering that could be placed in these pavers that form the edges of the actual plaza. And so now I can open it up, and we can talk about some of the discussion questions, and a couple already have brought this idea up of, well, where did we get to this idea of 200 people? And one person mentioned that the Hmong communities do have large events, and there is a desire for 200 people. And there's also a desire for smaller events, for whether it's ceremonies or recreation that would facilitate 50 people. And so the purpose of the redesign was to understand, is there an opportunity to have the best of both worlds, where we can retain the actual physical plaza space in terms of the concrete at the master plan design, which you can see on this plan of 2,600 square feet. But then can we also utilize the overflow space to accommodate for 200 people? That changes the access, that changes the direction. So I think Chua brought up the idea of, well, is the design of the plaza set in stone? I think we can discuss that now. If we're changing the direction of this plaza to be used north and south to east and west on bigger events, does there need to be another backdrop on this east side? Should the design of the structure be pulled along that east side? Is there a functional reason for that? One thing to consider is, does this overflow space properly separate from the walkway that other users will be walking by? So we want to understand that if there is an event here, is it separated enough? And is the overflow space suitable for larger events? It's a scenario where it is an open grass space, and in order to accommodate other people, they can clearly stand in those areas, but it would be utilizing that space with folding chairs and having to bring in other amenities to facilitate an event of 200 people. So I guess my initial idea was to keep this high level, looking at the space, and if there's time left over, we can talk about many of the other specific materials, patterns, those type of details.
So I am just going to read, Callie Tao said that she thinks the latest Hmong Plaza design is a great starting point, but doesn't feel that it represents Hmong Americans as well. It's Hmong Chinese influences, but I feel we need a Hmong Southeast Asia American Chinese blend. You want those who live in Minnesota to see themselves reflected in this design. I don't know if you have an answer that you want to provide, but I just am reading that comment. And then let's see, who do we have? Sorry. Chua, do you have another comment, or is your hand still up from before? And please correct me if I'm saying people's names wrong.
Maybe
okay.
Remind people that that we have the Hmong Heritage Wall, and that was a collaborative effort that has both Minnesota Hmong symbols on it and Changsha Hmong symbols on it, because this is the sister city China Garden. And so I think we were envisioning this Hmong Plaza would be reflective of both of those cultures as well, that the focus would be on the sister city relationship between Minnesota Hmong and the Hmong in Hunan province. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay. Romy? You are
Romy, you're
muted.
on mute.
Here we go. Now can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
All right. First of all, I want to support Callie Tao's suggestions. Just that, you know, these are what we're looking at, I think, are kind of place markers. I mean, in terms of the designs and this and everything. And this is where as I understand it, the artist would be to come in and take these concepts and work with the Hmong advisory group to figure out what images to use, what stories to be told, what the frieze should say, you know, patterns like that. I have 4 specific comments about what I've seen. One is, in the original drawing, there was this lovely undulating wall in the back, and this whole piece strikes me as too rectilinear, too straight and too sharp. And so I wondered why Jennifer chose to change that undulating back wall into a flat one. You could still have your frieze on it. I just want to raise that question to her. Secondly, the front wall. The front wall is about 3.5 feet tall. And if that could be lowered to 18 inches, that would provide more seating area. I think that would be a much better use of that barrier, you know, that people could actually sit on. It could still be a short wall, but people could sit on it. Another thing about the space, if it's to be used for whatever, if there could be holes put in certain areas and sort of a tent structure that could be erected over it, I think that might be more useful for hot summer days, just to consider that, making, you know, coming up with a design for that. And lastly, we didn't talk about it much, but in the entryway, there are 3 benches in a straight line, and that just doesn't feel Chinese or Asian or Hmong or anything to me. They look boring and straight. And I think Carol can probably describe this better than I, but you know, we would want more of a sense of mystery there. We want perhaps trees of different shapes and sizes, and certainly have seating that was perhaps more oriented towards the Hmong Plaza. So those are my 4 comments.
Thank you, Romy. And I agree with what you were saying initially, that these are very conceptual. There were some changes, and I think like the undulating wall and a lot of those features will be redesigned with the help of the artist as we're going forward.
Do we know how close the east side of this is to the pavilion?
I would say you can see right here, this is the beginning of the landscape. The plaza is in this area. So it's probably 80 feet from the plaza. The Pavilion Plaza.
I think there could be some, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. That's a good point being raised, the proximity from one entity to another. But I believe with doing some land forming, let's say grading, i.e. I'll say the word berm more so, that there could be more of a visual, more of a unknown coming into a known kind of condition than what we have here on the existing grades that are even on the site today. And if I could continue, what I see here is, even if it's a congregation of 50 or possibly 200, the distance between the main travel path going from west to east to be involved into the plaza itself is so tight. It's, I think, too tight. I would hope to think that we can make an organic separation between the main path and then the start of this plaza itself. And and if I picture 200 people there, and I picture, let's say, 100 people at the dedication, where we all spilled out onto the sidewalk, I think during a celebration of 200, I think the front sidewalk in front of the plaza would be used, or would be really crowded with those attending the event. And I believe that if we expand to the west, which is a great idea, I think there's some major grade changes. We talked about possibly putting folding chairs there for an event, but we do have a considerable slope to deal with. So the way I'm seeing it, without being on the site today, I could see that there'd have to be some major retainer walls built there to give us a 1 or 2% slope for practical sitting. Then if it's a heavily used grass area, then we've got to maintain the grass in a more special way that I'm not sure the city of Parks and Recreation would be able to do, because the grass could be stressed really quite heavily over 1 or 2 or 3 consecutive weekends, let's say. And I think the capacity for the extra 200 for the overflow, I believe, will probably go right into the Paul Verret wild plum grove, which they can be removed, of course, and relocated, but just an observation. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Bill. To touch on a few points, I agree that there probably would be some grading is going to be needed in order for the overflow area to work. And then secondly, you touched on the use and the grass. I think that is a great point to bring up, because we would strategically need to, I think, plan when these larger events would happen. And so I don't know if I don't think we would plan these every consecutive weekend because of that factor. And also, I don't think that it would happen every consecutive weekend because speaking with other rec programming that is happening on the site, there are several different runs that run in front of the pavilion, and it would include this plaza area. And there's also a lot of events at the picnic pavilion that it would be difficult to have a 200-person event here and then another larger event at the picnic pavilion. So I think I just want everyone to understand that if we would accommodate 200 people, we would strategically need to work that in with other events.
Yeah, and I think the grass, yes, I appreciate what you're saying and everything. The events would have to be staggered, but given a hot summer period season, even once every 3 weeks in a hot summer, unless the grass has especially grass to it, or there's a way to inlay pervious pavers with the grass coming through, it would have to be definitely irrigated, and I think in all cases, for sure.
Yep. Thanks, Bill. We are considering irrigation
Okay.
as we're going forward in the next phases.
Oh,
Are there any other comments?
observation. I appreciate all the beautiful artistic, symbolic pavers and the fabric of the walk surface itself. It's unfortunate that if this were to go through, which I hope it does on the paving detail, that it really diminishes, it downplays the opportunities we have at the pavilion itself, where we basically just poured in large areas of concrete.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. I think a lot of these images of the plaza, I think we need to figure out how we can best install these, and we'll work with Cowley to understand what are the symbols we want to use, and then what is the best way to to install this. So it could be, this could be a concrete plaza, and these are stamped pavers. One of
Sure.
the recommendations was to use a lot of the smaller pebbles that form some of these patterns, but those will not hold up. So we need to be thinking about long-term maintenance and future repairs. So I would imagine that we would try to use similar materials, whether it's color or if it's concrete, and how we can get a lot of these features embedded into that.
Are you going to have another presentation of the entrance from the major stone gate to this plaza in your presentation tonight? Otherwise, I've got a couple of comments to make.
No, go ahead, Bill. These are the images that we have
Okay.
from the western gate. That's the point standing here.
Oh, okay. We have an existing maintenance service drive that is located to the south of the beautiful entry gate, and to a lot of us, it serves as a very uncomplimentary way to enter a garden area so beautiful as it will be. And there's I think there was one diagram or plan that I saw that the service drive turns into a paved area. Now, maybe that was a 217 plan.
Yeah, so this is the archway that was installed, and this is the service drive that Bill is talking about. So this is an unpaved trail at this point. It goes back to a pump house that is utilized by the golf course. As part of the 2017 plan, it was suggested that the pathway be removed, the main pathway to go around the lake be removed, and that this becomes the multi-use path that goes around the lake. As part of this scenario, I don't see people continuing that process all the way around, especially when it's uphill and they don't have a great idea of where they would be going. I see most people still traversing along this main path. And so I think one thing you brought up, Bill, is we should consider pushing this plaza back as far as we can, and utilize that wall as a retaining wall to possibly create space and overflow up front.
Yes, yes. And I'm concerned about the impact that the existing oak that's featured on the plan would have with the construction of a rather major retainer wall. I know the circles represent symbolically the tree, but I believe if we go out and measure it, we may have some, I don't know for a fact, but I'm sure we're going to have a good amount of root system having to be considered before we set a fine foundation for the retainer wall.
Yeah, there might be a few trees. There's one low quality tree that is within this area, but I think there is space that the site itself, the actual footprint could get moved back without significant damage to the trees.
Okay.
Similar to the pavilion.
Okay, thanks. I see 1, 2, 3, 4 contours in the expanded overflow area. So conceptually, it looks like we'd have to retain 3-4 feet for sure in order to make that more of a usable, friendly space. I can feature guests coming with their cultural costumes on and different shoe wear, and negotiating anything that's not, let's say, relatively flat will be an issue. And plus setting up possibly support tents of some sort, I think that could be a real concern.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. I think there is going to be some grading. I don't know if it's going to be significant as the 3 to 4 feet, but I think the idea here is If we want to have a 200-person plaza, I think this is the opportunity and this is the balance to create a space that is multi-use that can hold 50 people to 200 people.
Yeah, I would agree, Brett.
Do we
Okay,
have
I would like to
any other comments?
I just want to back up for a second because early on here, Linda had a comment that I think was in response to Cowley Tao, and I just want to make sure that it's stated. I will put it in the notes, or maybe I already have, but she was just saying, just like the Hmong Heritage Wall, we've envisioned the Hmong Plaza as having both Minnesota and Hmong symbols and Changsha Hmong symbols and representing both cultures. And you may have stated that as well verbally, but I just wanted to make sure that that was covered since it's a comment. And I just want to make sure that I know not everybody has a chance to read all the comments and listen. So just trying to make sure that we're including everyone. And then Bill Zychak has got his hand up next.
Yeah, so, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I'd like to jump in on pushing that plaza back from the path as much as possible and using that back wall, the migration story wall, as a true retaining wall. Other than that, I'm really curious what Kali Tao and Chu have in mind in terms of what they would like to see there. And maybe it's a little too early for them to say, but this was designed by Jennifer Bond. She resides in Changsha, and so her experience with the Hmong is in a Chinese setting. So, if there are changes that need to be added to this, now is a good time to start talking about it. And I'll be quiet.
Ellen, you're on mute.
Perfect. Does anybody want to respond to Bill's comment about lowering the wall, or somebody said lowering the wall, and Chua said not to lower it, or would not lower it, and also wondering what Cowley, Chow, and Linda, sorry, I'm leaning around to see my other notes, would like to see in terms of representation and symbolism, I think, and elements. Does anybody respond to that?
I don't know. We might not be at that point. I think we've heard a few of those,
Okay.
such as the undulating wall. Kali,
Yep.
it doesn't look like maybe you have any comments that you want to react to Bill's suggestion about changing some of those elements. And I know you haven't had a chance to go through this or talk specifically with others, but any thoughts would be great. And you're on mute, it looks like.
I'll jump in and just say, I think I heard, what I think I heard is that the backside of the retainer wall, if we could make a more organic disconnect between the main path and the plaza, push the retainer, the wall, the back wall, as close as we can to the trees, and make it a true retainer wall that retains basically all the grade, as versus probably a stand above grade retainer wall from the backside. That's what I thought I was doing.
Yep. Thank you, Bill. I think we'd also like to hear what Kali would say about some of the forms and the structure that was designed by Jennifer.
Yes, sorry about my, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I think it's a great idea to definitely merge the two, because my experience in, going to China is definitely different than, living here in America. So if we could find a good kind of blend of each culture, I think that would be perfect. I have, lots of ideas, but I think it's just flushing it out with the other designers and definitely also listening to what the Hmong community wants.
Thank you. Ellen, do you have another person on the list? It looks like Mai Chong has her hand up.
Yes, thanks, Brad. Not anything related to what we have been talking about, but just from like a design standpoint, will we be using any like natural vegetation or like trees or shrubs as a part of it too? I think Romy had mentioned earlier, but like a plaza without any shading, I feel like it may just not be used, right? If we don't have any shading that's available or natural shade. I think that's my main concern is just the natural environment.
Yeah, that's a great question, and we definitely do want some plant material that is put in there. I think that's going to be one of the tasks of the designers as we're looking at what are some of the species that will still have the Chinese principle with the forms. There's also been discussion about this, the very linear aspect of these plants here. Maybe this area changes, so there's this hide and reveal aspect to it. Similarly, on the east side, I think there's opportunity to put plant material in there too. So we definitely want to add that to it. And I think the suggestion of building anchors into the plaza is interesting because you can have a temporary tent go up initially before plant material has grown up.
Hi, Brad. Can I say something?
Yes, Christina.
Yes. In terms of Hmong Plaza, I don't want to talk too much about the cultural elements because that's not my expertise. I'm going to leave the Hmong experts to decide on that, to provide their professional perspectives. But I do want to talk about the size and the location of the Hmong Plaza again. This is the concerns we have repeatedly expressed in the past, that we would like this plaza to accommodate 50 people instead of 200 people. So at this point, I wish to point out the fact that I'm reminding myself too that we should not just worry about the size of this space of the current plaza. Everybody keep wondering, oh, this is only for 50 people. It's not going to accommodate for 200 people. And I wish to point out the fact that we can definitely utilize a lot of space around surrounding this plaza. For example, the pathway in front of it, the large green space next to it and behind the plaza, as well as the space inside the Chinese Pavilion and the space behind or in front of the Hmong heritage wall. I do not want people to think this Hmong Plaza is the only element of this current garden. We have Chinese Pavilion right next to it. We have the large space right behind the pavilion in front of the heritage wall. So Hmong heritage wall and Hmong Plaza are two key elements already in this area. Including plus the Chinese Pavilion. So all the space I just talked about can definitely be best utilized. So we just really should not worry about the size itself. Just inside the plaza, the all surrounding areas should be really considered as the larger space for people to hold an event to accommodate more people. On the 18th of September last year, we had this Size 2 dedication event, Twin City Chinese Moon and Abiding Love for the Garden on the same day at night. I remember, Bill, correct me if I'm wrong. I remember there were about 200 people roughly in the morning attending the event. There were probably more than 200 people. We were everywhere. Okay, we were in front of this potential Hmong Plaza. We were in front of a pavilion. We were in the pathway. We were everybody's in a different, everybody's everywhere. But I did not really feel there was over a crowded area. Actually, everybody was very comfortable mingling and talking to each other. So let's consider the entire area for people to come to attend the event. I mean, if the Hmong people want to hold their event in this plaza. So let's not talk about inside size of the plaza only. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Christina. Ellen, you're still on mute. Bill Zychek, it looks like you have a question.
Just to comment about the plantings in the area, particularly if the plaza goes back where the migration story wall is a retaining wall. That whole part of the plaza will actually be pretty well covered up by oak trees. And there will be plantings in the area that still need to be defined. And I think it's good that you break that up and remind us that we need to do some plantings along that walkway in particular to provide more shade.
Yes, thanks, Bill. These are the trees in back that Bill is talking about. Like we mentioned, there's not this much green space, but we can pull, there's space to pull this back to utilize some of the shade on these trees, and then also provide shade along this entry.
Unfortunately, the shade factor from the existing trees won't help a lot at 2 in the afternoon, just because of the sun angle and the fact that that we're facing south, I think. So again, I agree with Bill and whoever else, the importance of having some natural shading as a major component is most favorable.
Linda, do you have a question? Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, I'd like to hear just a little bit more from the Hmong members about the use of this space, because if they're thinking that we need space for people to, picnic on, 200 people to picnic on, and people bring blankets and picnic, they can picnic on the green space. But if they're thinking about they need 200 people that are going to be dressed up in high heels and beautiful gowns and wanting to sit in chairs in the grass, is that really going to work? And is that a realistic use of this space? Anyway, so I've got some questions about that kind of use. I appreciate Christina reminded us that there's other spaces around there, but if everybody is going to be watching a couple get married and we've got a hide and reveal between the pavilion and the plaza with landscaping, then those people that are sitting in the plaza won't really be able to see what's going on in the plaza. But if they're just having a social gathering of 200 people and people can be milling around in these two spaces, then that will work. So I'd really like to hear more from our Hmong members.
Thank you, Linda. Can anyone respond to Linda's question? I think she's saying that there may be a hide and reveal or a buffer on this east side, so we wouldn't be able to utilize the other pavilion. And how is this going to be used during large events? Is it going to be chairs that we would have to bring in? Because I think this scenario really does have a lot more work when you're holding a big event where you need to bring all your tables in, your tents, your chairs. There really isn't an opportunity to put in a restroom in this location, so there would be portable restrooms that would be brought in. So there is that aspect of a lot of preparation and setup. And including any permitting that would be required. I think this scenario of setting something up for 200 people would require a permit, no different than a permit from the picnic pavilion. Similar to that, I can't say that it's the exact cost, but in order to regulate and to permit the space, these are some of the aspects that, as an operations, we have to think about with trash receptacles and doing those type of things. Allie, do you have a question?
Hello. Sorry, can you hear me?
Hello. Yeah.
Hi. I just want to sort of jump back a little bit to something that Romy said earlier about the rectilinear aesthetic. I agree with her. I think that the original design offered a little bit more of a pathway into the shrubbery that exists behind. And when you have a space that is supposed to offer ideally a 200-person capacity, it is possible to allow for the green space to play a role in that 200. And when you have non-rectilinearity, then you have the forest playing a role in sort of reconstituting what it means to populate space. I think that fluidity is important. I think the overflow space is a surprising and generous feature, not just for the Hmong overflow of the plaza, but also because it offers architecturally a sense of intimacy, and it's possible that people coming to the garden for the first time will gravitate to that space. It's also very well positioned. It overlooks because it is on an incline, and so the function of the space will therefore change. I do wish to also second something that Linda said just a moment ago. We want to keep the green space in good condition, and if it is indeed going to be a place where, you know, graduation ceremonies, festivals and fashion shows and are to be held, weddings and the like, then having non-grassy area is important. But I guess that the point is that the park is very much a part of all the elements that exist within it. And so it's important, I think, for all those who wish for, you know, this particular area to function a certain way, to also consider the green space and the immense give that it can offer in relation to this symbology that exists on, I guess, developed construction.
Thank you.
Thanks, Allie.
My Chong and Linda have a little dialogue going over here, but my Chong said, sorry if you have to repeat yourselves, but throughout this design process, have there been photos and images shared to generate more ideas on the designs? And Linda said, I believe the images are just placeholders to allow for the artists to use their creative skills and research skills to propose symbols and images that would represent the two Hmong communities as well. Brett, I don't know if you want to respond to that.
Yeah, I think these images are the first design concepts that were sent from the Chinese artist, and in a sense, they are placeholders and they can change. So I think the next step is to take these and figure out what are those elements that are cultural elements that are significant to everyone. And so Bill brought that up of beginning that conversation now. Are there specific elements, like what is being shown is the woman's headdress and the bass drum and the wind instrument. It's got the large horizontal beam that resembles the ox. So all these are conceptual, and I think they're open to interpretation.
Can I just add that I've been a part of other designs too, where like they have like just like photos that they share with the groups and ask groups about like what parts of the photos they like as part of the area. I feel like that would be really helpful for you know, more conversations about the design, especially around what you know, the environment could look like as well. So to me, for like things that could like signify Hmong, and other Hmong community members, feel free to speak up. But you know, things that are iconic for me would be like rice paddies, right, or like rice plantings, bamboo. Other ones could be like different. I don't know, like just like different trees or like that are really small, skinny. So I just don't know how that would be possible in our park system, and if that would be considered like not appropriate for our park spaces because they're not natural to the environment there.
Yes, thank you. I think we're open to suggestions. In previous presentations, we've shown a lot of the symbols of whether it's the elephant's foot, the headdress, like a lot of these, or the butterfly. I think a lot of those have been identified, and I think if there are others, like it's great to hear about the rice paddies. Regarding those, it's not going to be an actual plant similar to the bamboo. I mean, there's images here that's showing bamboo trees, but that's not going to be able to be grown here. So maybe there's a creative way or an artistic way to show those elements within a structure like this.
This is Chua. Have you considered maybe for the back wall? I'm talking design. Like, have you seen the Hmong cloth, the story cloth, where Hmong ladies, they would sew it in, and it would just tell the story of like.
Yes.
I would use concepts from that as a part of the wall. The headdress to me feels a little bit Mongolian, which is why maybe it's throwing me a little bit off. I think you have good elements of the Hmongs. Without looking at the detail, you wouldn't get that at first look. It's just my feedback.
If I could jump in here, I think at the last meeting we were talking about if it was possible to tell the Hmong migration story through a format of a story cloth embroidery that's rendered into stone. So that's something that we have talked about, and I'd love to see what that might look like. Another thing we've talked about as far as the symbols is how much of a duplication of the symbols in the plaza do we want to have of what is on the heritage wall. So the heritage wall already has the headdress and the gang and you know, some of those symbols. Are there other symbols that are important to the two Hmong cultures that could offer new cultural information in the Hmong Plaza that's not just a duplicate of what's on the Hmong heritage wall? So I love the idea of, you know, could you have some kind of a rice field pattern in stone, carved in stone, or could you have a bamboo pattern, you know, carved there? So I'd like to hear more of those kinds of ideas.
So Callie Tao has said that she plans to make the migration wall to include Hmong embroidery that tells the migration story. And was that Linda just now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Linda's the only one that has her hand up. I thought there was somebody else that had their hand up as well. No, no one does. So people are able to look in the chat. It looks like there are some images that are being added to provide some more information about elements that Mai Chong is looking at.
Yeah, thanks for including those. Hi, Chong. I think we'd have to be creative on what type of plant material we have that grows in this climate. But they would be great to see that type of that structure and the texture of it.
And then we have a question or a comment from Bill, I think.
So, the head of the Hmong advisory committee, Ying, had suggested at one point, I think he's on this call, that there would be a rice grinder involved, that would be possibly one element associated with the plaza. And I think he had some other suggestions too. Ying, if you have anything to say about that, and now would be a good time.
Ying, you're on mute.
Still on mute.
Romy, do you want to jump in?
Oh, yeah, just a comment about the bamboo. We've been struggling to try and get that element in our northern garden in our backyard here. We planted 2 struggling plants. One died, the other one is just limping along. But we did notice at the Arboretum garden, there was a shock of sort of bamboo-like plant material that was along the edges of the greenery there. I think, Bill, you remember that too. So it won't look like what your image is, Mai Chong, but it may be possible to have some of that. I know that there's concern about it being invasive, so I'll leave it to the landscape architects to see what they want to, if they can control it. But I love the idea of having lots more plant material there.
So you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah, I think that we're talking about a couple things, different things, but we need to think about making something that attracts the funder to get money. And that is making different from what we usually see and what we think about in here. So I think that we need to think about a couple things like, I'm not talking about for Hmong people, but I like to make the popularity for the plaza is we have more space for people to use, and couple things will come to the good outcome. It generate income to the part. And the other thing, for those people that those communities that they are not part of these elements in this China garden, they should be part of usage in this garden. And the more people involved in this garden, and they will make the plaza looking better and provide the service to all other community that they don't have a chance to join us for the element. So I think that the floor that we design for the Hmong art on the floor is one thing that I think that they will help us to generate income or get more money from the funder, because that is something different that people didn't see that before. And when they see the blueprint that we design and may attract others. So we need to think about other things. And then I'd like to come back to talk about the 50 capacity original design by the architect from Changsha. And that is something that the community here didn't have the input for that yet. So she just thinking about the design normally based on what she thought. But here, the community, we need to have the input to make sure that this space used for all of us. For this why the idea to increase the capacity from 50 to 200 is benefit for the park, for the China Garden. It's not only for Hmong people, but for the community at large. So my point is that we already have enough space in the area, the existing area. So we just keep that and move forward. And I think that we need some other detail element on that. I think that I heard Linda talk about the pattern, not only the thing and the Hmong headdress or the Hmong necklace. I think that's it's a very good point. We can change because the Hmong people, we have a many symbol for those change. So don't need to worry about that. I think that's a good idea, you know. But the reason that I think about design the thing for that because just modify from the original plan that the Jennifer already made, you know. So just modify a little bit about that. But if we want to change that to something symbol, it's okay. It's okay. We can make some other and feature and make that change. Okay. So yeah, thank you, Bill. I think that we need to think about many other things, not just the tree, just the grass, just not something, but we need to think about how to impress or interest the funder. And that is my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ying. So it sounds like from a lot of these discussions that there are details that need to be worked out. Really trying to figure out what are these culturally significant elements that are going to be incorporated into the wall, into those artistic features. So I think the next step is to begin working with Kao Lee, some of the other designers to create these concepts that that take into consideration the organic feel, the undulating walls, that open space to make it a little bit more functional where people can sit on it, on that front wall. Look at creating more space up front for the overflow of the plaza. But I just, going forward, I think from this point, it sounds like from Ying that this plaza size of the 50 people is adequate for what we're looking at, but utilizing that the grass overflow. I think this is the direction. If we can have enough flat space in the grass that this area can be used for other elements, and we can for larger events, and we can look at other plant material to screen this. We're getting close. We've got about 10 minutes left if other people have comments, but I think that's the direction we want to take this. Is the idea is it'll stay at 50 people with an overflow space. Are there any objections to go forward with that idea? Mary, you have your hand up.
Yes, I'm sitting here listening to the pushing the details around, and I really have not heard agreement on the fact that getting only 200 more square feet, moving this over to the west a little bit, leveling it out a little bit has been accepted. I don't hear the Hmong community saying that, and I'm wondering, is there a plan somewhere along the line to gather more Hmong representatives than we have here to discuss this, so that we don't get a backlash later that they didn't know, they didn't understand. I think the conceptual part of this is fairly sophisticated, and if you haven't had a lot of experience in this, and me sitting here saying, gee, I wish I could be standing there looking at this, I just feel this is incomplete. I know you have to move on and you have to make risky choices, but I don't feel like this is much of a change from the original. And the original, there were reasons. The Chinese had some objections. The Hmong had some objections. Is there some kind of meeting or something where we can actually know that there's a partial consensus? I'm not naive enough to think that everybody's going to be in agreement, but I don't feel like the space has really been kicked around enough. The original wasn't very acceptable to some people. I mean, it was to me, but to other people, it did not seem to be. Is this change more acceptable? I want to protect us from the fact that people will be angry and inhibit us later on down the line because they didn't really understand the change. So that just my overview
thank
of
you,
it.
Mary.
And,
obviously, if you have questions, then maybe others don't understand it either. One thing that I will point out is the plaza size has not changed, and what we heard from the previous meeting is any larger plaza space is going to it's going to be in conflict with the Chinese garden. And so taking the same size plaza that you were saying that you think is acceptable, we're basically making an overflow space in grass. And I think we can work through some of those specific elements. What I'm trying to figure out is if we keep the plaza like it was in the 2017, like we're showing here, the same size, we're not increasing the impervious surface. Can we utilize the overflow space for a larger event size? I think that is the consensus or the middle of the ground that I can see. So I guess I don't know how we proceed. Not necessarily like we're going to be doing votes, but I guess I need to hear from people if they've got major concerns about using an overflow space for the additional 150 people. I think that's the question that we're talking about now.
And perhaps the question, Brett, is, again, what would be the realistic function of overflow? Is it a sit-down event, or is it a more of a gathering, a cultural gathering of people? Just for the fact, I think, as Linda mentioned, there are a lot of traditional different costumes, different footwear, which may not work on a gradual slope or a slope at all. So if we knew that everyone or majority of the events are going to be a sit-down event, then we can understand what we need to do with the grade. If it's more of a casual, just step off the pavement and walk up a few 5 or 6 degrees or percent, then we can work with that situation also, I think. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. I guess from my understanding of hearing from Ying, and to make the space the most usable, Ying is saying that it should be this multi-use space that is probably flatter. I don't know, Ying, if you got any updates, but that's kind of what I'm hearing from people. And so I think we need to look at this as the overflow needs to be relatively flat, and so there's probably going to be a need for some grading. But the idea is that it is in grass, and it's not on a hard surface.
I don't know if this comment is going to be helpful, but I'm hoping it will. The people on this advisory committee are representatives, as Brett was reminding you. So, we personally, as city staff, don't have the ability to reach out to everyone. We don't know everyone, and so we're asking for people to be representatives of different aspects of the community rather than speaking as individuals. And so I am hopeful that that is something that's happening, with each of you talking to different people to find out if they have thoughts that are, consistent with where we're headed, or if there are things that seem to be problematic. So that's hopefully how this is functioning, but
yeah, thank you, Ellen. I feel like we've gotten to a point where we've provided a design or something to react to. We clearly have more work to do in terms of those specific features, but I think we're nearing the end of our time. So what I hope that everyone can do is take this out to your network, and have them look at it. And the understanding is that the overflow space will be in grass, and I think we need to talk about it with your group, specifically how it should be used. I've heard that it should be a multi-use, so I think the grading would have to be, there'd be some grading that would have to be done. Mai Chong, do you have a last closing thing to say?
Yeah, my comments are basically, as we're all here on this call as representatives from our communities, and I feel like if we need some additional things from staff or from the committee here, we should be able to name it and ask for it. And what I've heard, the biggest question and that has not been resolved is like, how will this space be used? How do people want to use this space, right? So my suggestion is, if park staff is available, or if this presentation could be made available with the slides in a larger format, an accessible format, if it's available online, that the Hmong Advisory Committee actually meet with each other, right, with more members of the community, and make that available and invite them to participate. I would say to avoid the pushback about not knowing, or having a design that people don't like and complain about, is really to offer them the opportunity, make it available, make it public, and say, here are the meetings that we're having. We're looking to design this. This is the process that we're at. This is the chance. And if they don't show up, that's on them then, right? So I would just definitely recommend and encourage more meetings where we all promote the meetings and or promote the links where it's available to get information and feedback.
Great, thank you. That's great feedback. We will make this available. The recording will go up on the website. I can have all these slides that you can zoom in and out on. So they are a little bit larger format to reach out to the community. I think we could possibly work on a survey, if that would be helpful, where we can possibly reach some more people on a specific question about how should this space be used. So I think there's more to come. We do have a plan to have a meeting next week to go over the next set of items, which is the donor wall, the moon gate. And so similarly, I think we're gonna look at redesign, and I'll send those slides out to everyone so they have a chance to review beforehand. And we'll go through the same discussion about how should we move through the space, how should it function, what are some of the elements that that can be seen in the donor wall and the moon gate. So I just want to remind you that we will have we're going through the schematic design. We can have public reviews as we're going forward, and I think that's what your role will be as the advisory committee. But we do have the idea of going into construction documents later this spring. So I would like you guys to reach out to your groups, do it sooner rather than later, so we can have feedback within the next few weeks, so the next time we meet, if possible. Down below, I've got my contact information and also the project website. Please go there. That's where we're going to share a lot of information. That's where you can share it with others in the community.
Linda's hand is remaining up.
Yes, is there
Yes.
one final word, Linda?
Sure. As we're talking about use of this plaza space, I think we should all really keep in mind what we had envisioned as the primary use is that this is a space, an educational space, and it's a cultural space. And we're going to have school field trips coming through here, and then just daily visitors to the park that will be looking at the symbolism and the images here. And we will be creating educational materials to go along with that. It'll be on our website so that people can learn a lot more about the cultural aspects that are represented on this space. So the way it's going to be used every day is as an educational space. And it's only going to be maybe a couple times a year that it's going to be used for a large scale event space. So I think we really need to keep that in mind as we're thinking about the plans for the footprint for this.
I totally agree with Linda. 100%. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Well, if anybody has any other questions or comments, please send me an email. I'm collecting all of these and I'll add those to the notes. Otherwise, thank you for coming, everyone. Look for the invite for next Tuesday at 6:30.
Thanks, Brett.
Thanks, Brett.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Bob.
everyone. Have a good
Thank you,
night.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
A great meeting.
Bye.
Bye.